Quickly before I get into this video, I would appreciate it if you would leave a like and subscribe if you do enjoy this one. I don't ask for that very often, but this video here did take me over a year from starting recording the clips to getting the video uploaded. So because I put so much time and effort into this one, I would appreciate it if you would leave a like and subscribe if you're new. But anyway, let's get straight into it. I know I'm about 4 years too late to this trend, but I finally wanted to do my own 100 days video. So I'm sure everyone knows how these work by now, but basically I'm going to be trying to survive 100 days in a Minecraft world, and I want to see what I can achieve in that time. There's usually some kind of gimmick to these videos when people do them. They will do a specific biome or something like that. And my gimmick is that I'm not going to use any armour, and I've also set myself 5 objectives that I want to complete during this video just to make it a little bit more difficult. The first one is to kill the dragon. This is pretty standard in these 100 days videos. The second objective is to get all 5 netherite tools, and I think it's worth pointing out that a lot of these clips were recorded before the 1.20 netherite changes, so it was a little bit easier to get netherite back then. The third and fourth objective are to obtain a wither skeleton skull and a sponge. So these 2 items can be quite difficult to get because of the locations that you get them. So I just thought it would add a little bit of extra danger to the video, and that could be quite interesting. And the final objective is probably the hardest of the lot. It is to build a house. So I've got a habit of playing survival worlds. I'll dig into the side of a hill or a mountain, set up a bed and some chests, and I end up living there for months. So I don't want to do that in this video. I want to make sure that I have a house built by the time I finished and got to 100 days. With that out of the way, let's get straight into day 1. So I spawned in and I was lucky enough to find a village pretty close by. So while I raid the villagers for everything that they own, I want to quickly mention that this is a Bedrock world, but I'm going to be doing this challenge on hardcore. So obviously Bedrock doesn't have hardcore, but if I die at any point, I will be deleting the world and I will restart from scratch. I also won't be using any totems of undying because I don't really agree with using them in hardcore. I raided plenty of food and workstations from the villagers, but I wanted to mention this brewing stand here because it might be useful later on in the video. Once I finished looting the village, I set off on a search for a base location. And it didn't actually take long before I found this little bit of land here. It's a nice flat bit of land surrounded by water, so it should be pretty easy to defend. So I went straight down there, I spammed some torches around and got started on my house. And this zombie tried to tempt me with some iron armour, but of course I can't use it in this challenge, so I had to leave it behind to despawn. Day 2 starts off with me crossing the water to get some more wood to finish the house. But I ended up finding this little cave with a bunch of coal and copper, but the cave didn't have any iron, so I went on a search for some. And it actually took me most of the day before I finally found a little vein. And then it was time to go back and finish the house. And don't worry, this doesn't count towards the objective, this is just somewhere to set up for now. With my little starter setup built, it was time to get into some starter farms. So I started building a little wheat farm, but then I saw that one of the saplings that I planted grew with a beehive. So I decided to move where I was going to make the wheat farm, and I made it closer to the beehive instead. And the rest of day 3 was spent making some more farms. I made a small pen at the side of the house for some chickens, a bigger pen for some cows which I haven't found yet. And also I planted all of the sugarcane that I had because it's going to be useful later on. Day 4 started with me getting some of the cows and sheep that spawned close by into some pens before I decided to go and visit this ruined portal that generated close by to the island. And from the chest I got my first golden apple. These are going to be very useful throughout this video to help keep me alive in various different situations. I don't know why, but I decided to go on a hunt for some spruce wood. I didn't actually find any, but I did find this ocean monument not too far away from my base island. So of course I am going to need this later on in the video. So I took note of where it is and I'll definitely be coming back here. I also found another ruined portal, and in the chest there is a gold pickaxe with fortune 2. Of course this is pretty useful to have early on in a world. I headed back to the base not managing to find any of the spruce wood that I set out to get, and once I got back I thought it was time to go find some diamonds. So I started digging down to the bottom of the world, but I bumped into this cave and I'm just not prepared to explore this right now. So I headed back to the surface and I spent a day looking through some shallow caves that I could find nearby. I was mostly looking for iron, but also any coal and copper is going to be useful at some point. I got plenty of iron, so I decided to make my first ever shield. And this actually turns out to be one of my best decisions during this video, and I still had plenty of iron left over, so I made my first set of iron tools and a few spares. With my new shield I decided I was ready to take on the caves. So I headed down there and it didn't take long before I found my first vein of diamonds. And this is when I remembered that I had a Fortune 2 gold pickaxe back at the base. So I went back to get it, and I would like to apologise in advance for the clip you're about to see next. So I found some more diamonds and I used the gold pickaxe. I've played Minecraft since 2012 and I had no idea that you couldn't use gold pickaxes to mine diamonds. So all of these diamonds went to waste. I don't know how I managed to mine all 4 of them before realising that the diamonds weren't dropping. But swiftly moving on, I did manage to find 2 more small veins of diamonds, so that made up for the mistake a little bit. I found some more small veins of diamonds on day 8. And at the end of the day, I crafted my first set of diamond tools. This includes a hoe because I'm going to need it later on in the challenge. I collected some obsidian with my new diamond pickaxe and I headed straight to the nether. It's pretty dangerous here anyway, but of course I've got a bit extra careful because I don't have any armour. Pretty much everything can kill me in 1 or 2 hits. So I made sure to keep looking down at the floor so I don't anger any endermen. I had no luck finding a fortress, so I headed back home to grab some stuff. I decided to make an enchantment table while I was there, although I don't have enough bookshelves yet to get the full level enchantments. So I headed back to the nether to keep searching for a fortress. I didn't find a fortress on day 11, but I did find some ancient debris. I left my diamond pickaxe back at the base, so I didn't mine it for now. It would be pretty embarrassing to mine a valuable item with the wrong pickaxe. I finally managed to find a fortress on day 12, and it didn't take long before I got my first wither skull. So that is the first of the 5 objectives complete. I also used the brewing stand that I got from the village earlier to make my first fire resistance potions. I always feel much safer in the nether when I've got these. I collected some more blaze rods so I don't have to come back here, and then I headed back home. Back in the safe overworld, I spent the whole day fishing for pufferfish. I'm sure most of you can figure out why I'm going to need these, and I did manage to get 2 of them. Day 15 I went back on the hunt for some spruce saplings. I was lucky enough to find this area with spruce and dark oak right next to each other, which is nice because I wanted some dark oak as well. And I also found a dog which I tamed up. I can't wait to go on 85 days worth of adventures together. Day 16 I stayed up at night looking for spiders to get some string, and moving on to day 17, I set up a small automated wool farm because I'm going to need the wool later on, and I actually came very close to dying to some phantoms here. There's a few times during this 100 days that I came close to dying, but I think this is the closest. But I managed to get back to the house and regain some health, and then I went back out to get a phantom membrane while I had the chance because I'm going to need one of these later on when I go to take on the dragon. I got a sheep into my little wool farm, and it didn't take long before I got my first bits of wool. And then I used the pufferfish that I got from fishing earlier to make some water breathing potions. Of course I used these potions to get a sponge from the ocean monument that I found on day 5. The hardest part of this objective was actually breaking into the monument. It took me over 3 minutes to break into it with the mining fatigue from the Elder Guardian. But once I made my way in, it was a pretty easy kill on the Elder Guardian and I got the sponge. So that's the second objective out of the 5 that is complete. On day 20 I started working towards the hardest objective. So I started off by collecting some copper, and I also collected some andesite because I want to use these blocks to build my house. While I was in the caves I found a zombie spawner which could be useful later on. Before starting the house I decided that I wanted to enchant my tools, so I brewed up some night vision potions and headed back down to the caves where I managed to find a 13 vein of diamonds. I'm pretty sure the biggest vein you can find is 8, so this must be 2 veins right next to each other, but it's still the biggest clump of diamonds I've ever managed to find. And I also managed to find some lapis, which is the reason I came down here. So I headed back home with 16 diamonds to add to the 4 that I already had. But before I could enchant I had to sacrifice a few cows to get the final bookshelves that I needed. And I got pretty lucky with my shovel and pickaxe, both of them having Unbreaking 3, Efficiency 4 and Fortune 3. The sword and the axe were not as good, but that's not a big deal for now. With the enchanting out of the way, I can finally get to work on the house. I already had a design in mind, and I got the first level done by the end of day 25. I got straight back to work on it on day 26, where I finished most of the second level. So I could move on to the roof the next day, but unfortunately I didn't have enough oxidized copper. So I just laid out the roof's trim for now. And then I went around the house and added some smaller details like the support pillars and some flower baskets, although I don't actually have the flowers at the moment. I started filling in some of the oxidized copper in the roof, but I don't have enough of it oxidized just yet. So I'm going to have to finish this another day. So I got all of the wool together that I've been collecting from the wool farm and I headed to the nether. I started digging down to Y level 15 and then I remembered the ancient debris that I didn't mine earlier on. So I made sure to go and get that so I didn't forget about it. And then of course I used the wool to craft some beds to look for some more ancient debris. I'm not a huge fan of the bed method for finding ancient debris, but it is a cheap method for early game. and I did have some good luck with it as well. Although it is very dangerous when you're not using armour, and it almost killed me a few times. But after 2 days of searching, I ended up with 32 ancient debris, which is more than I need to make all of my diamond tools into netherite. So I headed home and I turned it into 8 netherite ingots. But I want to get the best enchantments possible on my diamond gear before I use these. So I left them for now and I got back to work on the house. I still haven't finished the roof, but I got to work on a basement because I'm going to need somewhere to store all of my items. I placed all of the chests on day 34 and I finished it on day 35. It's not my best work ever, but it's good enough, and I started moving all of my items over from my other storage and got a little bit of organisation going. I used some blocks on the floor to signal what items go in each column. I'd usually use item frames for this, but I just thought I'd mix it up a little bit, and I still had a few more items that I needed to move into the storage room as well. I finally had enough oxidised copper to finish the roof on day 37. So I got to work on that, and then I added these windows into the roof, which is something I like to do with all of my builds. But that's enough building for now. I'm not going to say the challenge is complete just yet because I want to get the interior done before I call it a completed challenge. But I got a few things together and I headed out to explore. I wasn't really looking for anything in particular, but it got to the end of the day and I saw a woodland mansion in the distance. That's pretty lucky because it's one of the rarest structures to find in the game. I headed in on day 39 and I made sure to be extra careful because I know how much damage vindicators and evokers can do. And I quickly found this room here which has the efficiency 1 leather tunic in the chest. I've never actually heard of this before. I've heard of the efficiency 1 leather cap, but I've never heard about a tunic before. But anyway, I mentioned how much damage the Vindicators and Evokers can do, and I got extremely lucky here. When one attacked me, it managed to get one hit and it did 9.5 hearts. Luckily I managed to block myself away and regain my health, but that was very close to me having to restart the challenge from day 1. But I did carry on exploring the mansion and I started blocking off the doorways like this so I could get some easier kills on the Vindicators, just to make sure I didn't get hit by one again because I might not be so lucky next time. And I also managed to kill an Evoker and get a totem of undying, which is not actually something I was expecting to get in this video. But of course the rules that I set for myself before this video, I'm not allowed to use these, so I threw it away and I let it despawn. I killed 2 more Evokers on day 40, and of course I had to leave those totems behind as well. And then a Vindicator managed to sneak up on me and it got a hit on me again and left me on half a heart. But luckily again I managed to block myself in a room and regain all of my health. I looked around the rest of the mansion looking for any secret rooms or loot chests, but I couldn't find anything. And I think it's worth pointing out again that a lot of these 100 days were recorded before the 1.20 update, so even if I did find a chest, I wouldn't have been able to find the armour trim. I started heading back home before something managed to kill me in the mansion. The loot wasn't the best from the mansion, but I did manage to find some jungle and acacia saplings, as well as a bunch of different flowers while I was out. You might have also realised that I brought the efficiency 1 leather tunic back to the base. Of course I can't use this, but because it's such a rare item, I didn't want to leave it behind. So I'm just going to leave it in a chest for now. But anyway, I was getting a little bit short on food at this point, so I had to take care of the cows. And then I made a little bit more progress on the house. This is a floor design I use quite often on my main world. I just think the stripped birchwood in an alternating checkered pattern just looks really nice. I enchanted a new axe on day 42 and I combined it with my current one to get a pretty decent axe. The rest of the day was spent cleaning up the island a little bit. I started off by taking down some of the structures like my starter house that I didn't need anymore. And then I started placing dirt to fix the terrain. It was quite a big task. There was actually a lot of the island that I had to fill in or reshape. I also removed any gravel and replaced it with dirt because I wanted the whole island to be grass. And here's a better view of the whole island as it looks currently, as well as a better view of the house. I realised that I haven't really shown a clear shot of the house yet, so here's how it looks. And I do plan to fill in this area with dirt, but I'm waiting for the copper to oxidise first. Day 44 I grabbed some night vision potions and I headed to a cave that I saw near the village that I found at the start. I was mostly looking for iron, but I managed to find an 8 vein of diamonds, and I didn't realise straight away, but I managed to get 23 diamonds from this 8 vein, which is pretty lucky. I found plenty more iron, and then I realised that the cave I was in connects to the cave that I was in before. So it's a pretty easy trip home up the ladder. And here's everything I managed to get in about 20 minutes of caving. I think that's over a stack of iron blocks in total. I always forget how overpowered caving is now that you can use fortune on iron and gold. I started day 46 by collecting some dirt so I could finish cleaning up the island's terrain, and then I stayed up at night looking for some zombie villagers because I wanted to get into villager trading. I managed to find one, but I'm still gonna need another one at some point. And if anyone's wondering how I got the name tags, I got one of them earlier on day 21 when I found the zombie spawner, and I got the other one on day 14 while I was fishing for pufferfish. I started digging out some space in my basement for the villagers to go in once I've actually got the villagers. I had a bit of an idea in mind, but I didn't really know what I was doing, so I just started digging out some space and placing some pillars for now. Then I started digging out some space for the villager breeder, but of course this is useless without the villagers. So I stayed up at night looking for another zombie villager, and I almost died again to a creeper this time. And I don't know how I keep surviving these, but I got back to work decorating the area for the villagers the next day. I was going for a dark oak and spruce theme. And here's the finished room minus the villagers. I realised that I wasn't the best at showing my finished projects while I was recording these 100 days. So that's definitely something I'll have to work on if I ever make another one of these videos. But anyway, I headed back out again at night time, and this time I actually managed to find the other zombie villager that I needed. So of course I trapped him and I gave him the other name tag. I converted the zombie villagers on day 51, and I continued working on the villager breeder while I waited for them to change. I moved the villagers over to the breeder once they were fully converted. I would usually use minecarts to move villagers, but it was only a short distance, so I used boats instead. I threw them some bread and it didn't take long before they produced the first baby, and then I made some basic trades like this leather trade from one of the villagers that I converted just to get some emeralds to start trading with. I started working on a tree farm the next day because trading sticks is also a good way to make emeralds, and I just want to say straight away that I'm not a fan of how this project turned out. It was a manual design and it had space for the 1x1 trees and the 2x2 trees. It worked just fine, but I just didn't like how it looked in the end. This is why I usually like to plan out my builds before building them in survival. This was definitely my least favourite build from the 100 days. Another good way to make emeralds is by trading crops. So I flattened out some more land and I got to work on some new crop farms. I tried making them into a circle design just to mix it up from the standard square design that I would usually use. And I do plan to make one for potatoes, carrots and wheat, but at the moment I don't have any potatoes, so it's just carrots and wheat. And then I got to work on some new animal pens so I could remove the ugly cow pen that I've had in the corner since the start. I had to move all of the cows over and it actually went surprisingly well. I only had to take care of 1 or 2 of them. I built 3 more animal pens and then got the other animals into place. And then I got to work on the pathway just to connect all of the little builds that I've got together, just to make it all feel like it's one connected build instead of a bunch of disconnected builds. I was back with the villagers on day 60 trading some sticks for emeralds, and then I decided to show another view of the island now that I've added a few more builds. Unfortunately it is raining, but you can see everything that I've built so far. Moving on, I headed back to the enchantment table to enchant 2 more pickaxes. The first one wasn't great, but the second one had Unbreaking 3 and Efficiency 4, which is great for collecting stone, and that's actually what I needed it for. So after 5 or 10 minutes of collecting stone, I got back to work on the crop farm. I wanted to make a wall around each of them, so I started off by placing some solid stone, cobble and andesite, and then I went around and replaced some of the solid blocks with some stairs, slabs and walls. And I also just added some extra stairs and slabs around as well. I got to work building the walls around the other 2 farms the next day. I think they turned out okay, but it's definitely one of those projects that would look better if I had time to build up more things around them. But of course, with only 100 days on the world, time is pretty limited, so I didn't really build anything else around them. I started moving the villagers from the villager breeder over to the trading hall on day 63, and I used fletching tables for the first few villagers that I got in there to turn them into fletchers. I also made sure each of them was linked to a bed so they could restock their trades. Of course, fletchers are the ones that trade sticks for emeralds, so it's an easy way to stock up on some emeralds. And you might have realised that I've not been using my shield for the last 10 days or so. I thought it might have been obstructing the video. It is quite big in the corner, so I try not to use it as much as I can, but I do use it at certain points when I feel like I need it. But anyway, to end the day, I crafted myself a new set of diamond tools, and I used some of the netherite that I got earlier to turn them into netherite tools. And this is because the 1.20 update was just around the corner, and I didn't want it to come out and then I'd have to go through all of that extra effort to get the netherite tools. So I thought I'd just get them before the 1.20 update came out. I did plan to get all of these 100 days recorded well before the 1.20 update, but because it took me so long to record all of these days, I actually went over into 1.20, so I never planned to go to a bastion to get the netherite template anyway. And this is actually the third of the 5 challenges complete. I do plan to get the best possible enchantments on this netherite gear, but I have actually crafted them, so that is the objective complete. The 2 objectives left are to finish the house and to kill the dragon. There was a huge amount of time that went by between day 63 and day 64. The 1.20 update got released and I spent a lot of my time on my main world getting used to the features over there. So I think I went about 3 or 4 months without actually playing on this world. So there was a big time jump between those days. So at the start of day 64, I was just looking around and trying to remember the projects that I was working on and the things that I'd already done. And then I got straight back to work moving the villagers over to the villager trading hall. I already had 3 Fletchers in place, so now it was time to get 3 farmers in place. But I only had wheat and carrots to trade with the farmers, so I had to break the composters and place them down a few times until I got a wheat or a carrot trade. And with the 3 farmers in place, I got my first weaponsmith in place, and once I completed a bunch of trades and leveled him up, he offered me a diamond axe and a diamond sword. These are not trades that I'm going to need in this video, but if I ever decide to continue on the world, they could be quite useful at some point. I headed out with my fortune 3 shovel to collect some flint. I used it to level up another weaponsmith, but then I realised that I didn't actually need this and I needed a toolsmith instead. So it was a little bit of a waste, but I can still use the flint to level up a toolsmith when I do get one. Something weird happened on day 66. So you can see here that I get the villager in the minecart and I press the button to send him down the track. I started following him and then I decided to turn around and I threw some bread to the villagers so they could breed up some more. And then when I did decide to follow the track down to the villager trading hall, I got to the end and the villager was nowhere to be seen. I was just so confused. I have no idea where the villager went. The minecart also disappeared. Luckily I've got plenty more villagers, but I was just pretty confused at this point. I assume it was just a bit of a bedrock bug that came with the 1.20 update. But anyway, on day 67 I actually got the toolsmith in place that I needed. And once I made my way through all of the trades, I got the shovel and the pickaxe trade, which is what I wanted. I also got myself a cleric in place. This is going to be useful later on to get ender pearls to go to the end. And then I got to work on the librarians, which is usually the most time consuming part of setting up a villager trading hall. I have space for 6 different librarians, so I want to try and get the 6 most useful book trades. And after a few minutes of breaking and placing the lectern, I managed to get the first useful trade, which is fortune 3. So of course I made sure to buy at least 1 book to lock in that trade. It didn't take long before I got a villager to trade me the silk touch book, and shortly after that I managed to get the mending trade. This was actually for 36 emeralds, which is pretty expensive. Usually I would try to get the cheapest trades, or at least cheaper trades, but because I'm limited with my time for this video, I was just happy to get any of the books that I wanted for any price. I also managed to get the efficiency 5 trade before the end of the day, but I had to go and sell a few sticks to get some more emeralds so I could lock in the trade. I'm not funny enough to make a joke about day 69, but I did manage to get a power 4 book from a villager. This will be great to add to my bow that I enchanted earlier that I forgot to show. I got my final librarian in on day 70 and I got the unbreaking free trade for 11 emeralds, which is actually very cheap for that trade. And to finish off the trading hall, I added 2 leather workers just because I had that one from earlier that offers me 1 emerald for 1 leather. Taking a break from the villagers for a little bit, I headed back down to the cave that I was in at the start. And this is the first time that I noticed there's a little bit of a visual glitch with my texture pack where some of the items are really big in the player's hand, but they're also big in a mob's hand. So yeah, I just found it kind of funny watching these zombies walk around with massive pieces of string in their hand. But anyway, the reason I came down to the cave was to collect some more obsidian, because I'm 71 days in and I still don't have an ender chest. So I sorted that out, and then I also made sure to add a silk touch book to my pickaxe, so if I do put my ender chest down somewhere I can pick it back up. I headed out to the ocean to collect some kelp because I need a little bit for a project that I'm going to do next, and for that project I need to head away from the base a little bit and find that zombie spawner that I found earlier. So now that I've got most of the useful book trades, I'm going to need a way to get some easy XP, so I'm going to turn this zombie spawner into a quick and easy XP farm. I would have preferred a skeleton spawner, but I haven't managed to find one. But anyway, these farms are extremely simple. They've been around for over a decade. I dug out a 9x9 area around the spawner and set up some water streams. So this will take all of the zombies to a single block, and then I need to take them up by 21 blocks and drop them back down. I almost finished it all in one day, but I still had to set up the water elevator to get the zombies to the top of the drop chute. And once I'd done that, the farm was complete, so I just had to remove the torches and then give it a test. It's not amazing, but it does work, and I don't need a whole lot of XP, so it should be fine. I also realised that I got a potato from one of the zombies, which could have been useful earlier on. I started planning out all of the enchanted books I was going to need to apply to each tool to get the perfect gear, and I realised that I didn't have a looting free book to apply to my sword, so I headed to the enchantment table to try and get looting free on the netherite sword. And after 5 attempts, I didn't manage to get it, so I ended up settling for this sharpness 4 knockback 2 sword instead. I decided to head to my villager breeder, and I turned one of the villagers there into a librarian until I got the looting free trade. I applied it to my sword with a couple of other books, and I ended up with this sharpness 4 looting free, unbreaking free, knockback 2 and mending sword, which is pretty much perfect. And then after almost 2 more full days of mining trees, farming and selling it all for emeralds, I finally managed to buy all of the books that I was going to need to apply to the rest of the gear. So I took all of it out of the chest and I headed back to the XP farm. It took a full day of killing zombies, applying books to tools and throwing away any armour that was dropped. Well, maybe not exactly perfect. Of course sharpness 5 would be better than sharpness 4, and some people might argue that I could put silk touch on the shovel, but they're pretty much perfect tools, which is good enough for me. So I can finally move on from villager trading and enchanting. I only have 18 days left for this challenge, so I want to make sure I'm ready to fight the ender dragon when I want to do it near the end. So I headed to the nether to collect some ender pearls. And yes, I did completely forget that I got a cleric earlier for this exact reason, but I crafted up 20 eyes of ender and I started following them to try and find the stronghold. And they led me to this village, which was over 3,000 blocks away. I found the exact spot that the Eyes of Ender were pointing to, which seemed to be near this bell. So I started heading down towards the stronghold, which was kind of difficult because of the big cave that was underneath the village. But eventually I did manage to find it, and I also found a library with a chest with the eye armour trim inside. Of course, this is pretty useless in a challenge where I'm not allowed to use armour, but I still grabbed it anyway. After some more exploring, I found the end portal, which had 0 out of the 12 Eyes of Ender already filled in. It's not a big deal, I've got plenty of them, so I filled 11 of them in here. And if you're wondering why I didn't fill in all 12 straight away, it's because mobs can make their way into the portal, and then there's a chance I could get knocked off the platform when I do go through. Now that I knew where the portal was, I started heading back to the house, and I kind of found a shipwreck. I don't know if you can really count this as a shipwreck because it looks pretty intact to me, but I headed inside and I found some more armour trims, which again are pretty useless, but I grabbed them anyway. I spent most of day 86 making my way back to the base because it was 3,000 blocks away, and I got a little bit lost on the way as well. Back at the house, it was finally time to get started on the interior. I've never been the best at doing interiors, but I started off by placing some walls to split it up into different rooms. And then I started working on the kitchen first with a smoker. I put some barrels up to act as cupboards. And you can't forget the chopping board with some bread. I think I put this in all of my kitchens. I moved the enchantment table inside on day 88. And it fits perfectly into this little section here. And then I got to work on a small bedroom. I went around the house to add some smaller details around, like some paintings and some plant pots. And I used some armour trims at the front door, which are supposed to resemble coat racks. And as I went to put some iron armour onto one of the armour stands, I actually put it onto my player by accident. So I think this technically counts as me failing the challenge. But of course I took it straight back off and put it onto the armour stand instead. Another little decoration that I wanted to have around the house was some candles, but I didn't have any wax, so I got to work on a little bee farm just to the side of the house. And then of course I went around to place some of the candles. And you might be thinking that this is the house complete, and then that means the objective is complete. But there's actually one more thing I want to add before I consider it finished. But before I get onto that, I built a small pumpkin and melon farm by the side of the house. I wasn't too happy with it, but it was just there to fill up a little bit of space. And I actually realised that I didn't have a single melon yet, so I headed over to a small jungle that was right next to the base. And I searched the entire thing and there was not a single melon there either. But moving on to the final little detail that I want to add to the house, I want to get a certain block. And to get that block, I'm going to need a trident. Luckily, I've already got 2 here. I didn't make a note of when I got these because I really wasn't expecting to use a trident during this challenge. But I searched through quite a lot of days worth of footage and I found that I got the first trident on day 17, just as I was about to start working on the wool farm. So then I got to work on a little contraption. And I'm sure some of you already know what I'm going to do and why I need the trident. And the final thing that I did on day 92 is get a creeper in place on top of this lightning rod. I headed back to the villager breeder for the final time during this challenge. I needed a channeling book to add to the trident, so I converted one of the villagers into a librarian, and I couldn't believe it when I got the trade in the first attempt. I was expecting this to take most of the day, so I was pretty shocked when it happened first try. I applied the channeling book to a trident along with an unbreaking and a mending book, and at this point I'm just waiting for it to rain, so I started preparing a little bit more for the dragon fight. The main things that I wanted to have ready were plenty of golden apples, plenty of blocks, some strength potions, and then some slow falling potions, which is why I got the phantom membrane earlier on. I was still waiting for rain on day 94, so I worked on a little composting system just to pass some time. And when I headed upstairs, I realised it was actually raining, I just couldn't hear it from the basement. So I quickly headed over to the creeper and I threw my trident at the lightning rod to turn it into a charged creeper. So I think everyone knows if you throw a channeling trident towards a creeper during a thunderstorm, it will turn the creeper into a charged creeper. But I don't think it's so well known that if you get a creeper on top of a lightning rod, you can then throw the channeling trident at the lightning rod during rain, so you don't have to wait for a thunderstorm. So of course this works on Bedrock, as you've seen here. I don't know if it's the same on Java Edition. But anyway, I'm sure it's much more common knowledge that if a charged creeper blows up another creeper, a skeleton, a zombie, or a zombie piglin since the 1.20 update, that mob will drop its head. So if you hadn't figured it out by now, what I'm trying to do is get a creeper head. I had a little bit of a plan, so when it got to night time I trapped a creeper in a boat next to the charged creeper, and I tried to ignite the charged creeper, but on the first attempt I set it on fire. And you can kind of see that I'm scared at this point, because if I die I lose 95 days worth of progress. On my second attempt I actually missed the creeper completely. I got it on the third attempt, I tried getting away and I was so close to dying here. But as I nervously walked towards the hole, I saw the creeper head and I realised it wasn't a waste of time. So I added it to my bedroom as the final little bit of decoration that I wanted to add to the house. So with that added, that is the house completely finished and the 4th out of the 5 objectives completed. And you might be wondering why I went through all of that effort and I risked dying just to get a useless mob head for decoration. Yeah, so am I. But anyway, I made sure I was ready for the dragon fight and I headed back to the portal. And on day 97 I was ready to head into the portal. And it was at this point that I decided that even if I died to the dragon, I'm still going to upload this video anyway. It would be a shame to waste such a good attempt. So I jumped into the portal. I've killed the dragon a bunch of times over the 12 years or so that I've played the game, but I've never killed it before without armour. And I started off with a pumpkin on my head, but I realised pretty quickly it was just going to obstruct my view and obstruct your view, so I took it off. I took most of the crystals out pretty easily, but it's always the cage ones which are more challenging. So I had to pillar up to get these ones, and this is why I brought the slow falling potions for when I get knocked off. I managed to destroy the second crystal that was in a cage, and that's pretty much all of the hard work done now. Although I did come very close to dying to a blast from the dragon. Luckily I brought plenty of golden apples to help me regen my health. And the rest of the fight is as simple as waiting for the dragon to perch in the middle and then doing as much damage as I can each time. I ran in for the final few hits, and this fight was actually a lot easier than I was expecting it to be. I started it on day 97 because I was expecting it to take at least a couple of days, but I managed to get it done in just over 7 minutes. Of course I collected all of the XP, and then I made sure to pick up the dragon egg, and I headed home. I didn't really have any plans for the dragon egg, so I just left it in my ender chest. With the dragon dead, that is all 5 of the objectives that I set for myself complete, and now I've got 3 days left and I don't really know what to do. I don't want to start a new building project at this point, so I crafted up a few rockets with the bits of gunpowder that I had, and I headed back to the end. I decided that now the dragon's dead and I've done everything else that I wanted to do, I may as well go and get myself an elytra. It would be a big shame to die at this point, so I made sure to be careful while I was bridging over the void, and I made sure to look at the ground as much as possible so I didn't anger any endermen. And after about 15 minutes of searching, I found my first end city, but unfortunately this one didn't have a ship. And finally on day 100, as my time was running out, I saw another end city in the distance. I headed towards it and luckily this one did have a ship. I pillared up to it to save time and I headed straight for the elytra. I looted the chest, making sure not to take any of the armour, and I used the rockets that I brought with me to fly back to the portal. When I got home, I applied a mending and unbreaking book as I contemplated whether I should even be allowed an elytra in this challenge. Although it is something that I wear, it doesn't actually provide any protection, so I'm pretty sure it should be fine. But anyway, that is everything. 100 days completed. I really enjoyed doing this challenge. I didn't build as much as I would have liked on my island, but it was a nice change going from a world where I have absolutely everything to starting again in the early game, and the twist that I made for myself where I had to use no armour and I had a few objectives to complete just made it a little bit more interesting as well. So I enjoyed making this video. I hope everyone watching also enjoyed. I assume if you made it to this part of the video you probably did. I don't know if I'll ever continue on this world, but I do have another plan for another 100 days challenge that I want to try. And that one's going to be way more challenging than this one. But if I do decide to do that video, it's not going to be uploaded for quite a while. But anyway, I hope everyone enjoyed. I would appreciate it if you would leave a like and subscribe if you made it this far into the video, because I put a lot of effort into this one. And I will see you all next time.